Home is something many of us take for granted. It's not just where we sleep at night, but it's often where we seek and receive refuge, physically, psychologically, and emotionally. One definition of home is simply the place where you live is your home. But is it really that simple? I think the concept as well as the reality of a home are both very complex. My daughter once said to me when I was recently divorced and left the only home she knew for a rental, "Wherever you are, Mom, is home to us." And I think that's because I did my best to create a sustainable, safe environment wherever I could. Not everyone has that opportunity, but should. Abraham Maslow, the American psychologist, in my mind, introduced the concept of home, and I am stretching this a bit. In 1943, in his paper, A Theory of Human Motivation, he offered a classification system intended to reflect the universal needs of society with a base or foundation, then moving toward more complex human needs. These are divided between those things that prevent us from growing, being deficient in our lives, to those things that help us grow as individuals. This is a psychological idea that others in the field use to create what many of us know as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How I tie this into home is that the first foundation of the pyramid is physiological, meaning the basics of breathing, food, water, homeostasis, a shelter being key in that foundation. The second platform is safety, meaning resources, employment, sustainability of safety, and physiological well-being. And the third is love and belonging. These three things are fundamental in our ability to develop our individual capacity to be curious and to grow emotionally, and to further our self-esteem towards self-actualization. What I think Maslow and the subsequent theorists understood is actually the complex meaning of home. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, our podcast featuring nonprofits and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Dr. Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. We hope you'll love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. And for all of you followers, Small and Gutsy has just been granted nonprofit 501c3 status. We are thrilled to have moved in this direction, enabling us to continue to meet our vision of interviewing as many smaller nonprofits and social impact organizations as we can. So please pass along any valuable information you hear today to others, and send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at lwitkoff@gmail.com. That's 2 T's and 2 F's. Home is not a home without knowing you can support yourself in it and be empowered to be part of a community. We are, in fact, all in this together. 55 years ago in 1968, as a response to the discriminatory inequity in jobs, housing, and other basic rights exposed by the civil rights movement, a group of folks found Abode Communities in California, a nonprofit social enterprise. Abode Community is truly reflective of its name, communities. They foster a culture of housing inclusion by developing neighborhoods that empower the residents. This is about respect and sustainability. They believe that housing is a human right, and in fact, we know it is a social determinant of health. This particular organization is outside of our Small and Gutsy vision, as they've grown substantially beyond our $10 million revenue limit. But what is a welcome addition to our Small and Gutsy family is their housing stabilizing program, which launched in 2020. At least something positive and forward-thinking began in 2020. I really commend them. Beyond Homes is a resident services program based on a wraparound social service model, which our guests will focus on in today's podcast. Beyond Homes is aptly named. It focuses on 4 core areas: empowering youth, areas that include social emotional learning, mentoring, tutoring, after-school programming, scholarship, engagement; building adult and senior capacity as in benefits assistance, aging in place, and more; create linkages in communities, meaning policy, advocacy, and specialized referrals; and support housing retention, links to financial assistance and rent relief. They have truly thought of everything to keep individuals empowered to have and keep their home. I'm so proud to introduce my guest today, Holly Benson, President and CEO of Abode Communities, who, in reviewing her bio, takes housing and community development very seriously. In fact, over 25 years worth of expertise in advocacy, and with her leadership, she has made an enormous footprint in California. We owe Holly a great deal of gratitude and thanks. and Roche Malikuti, Senior Vice President of Beyond Homes, which operates at 22 affordable housing sites and serves more than 5,000 parents, children, seniors, and individuals previously experiencing homelessness. Roche has a rich professional history in support of social services and, in particular, sustainable housing options. So let's get started. Welcome, Holly and Roche. I don't know that either one of you has to share your passion in housing because it is so clear. But I really want to know, Holly, you have a rich history. Maybe we'll start with you as really the CEO and president, and really how the two of you got connected.
Thank you, Dr. Witkoff. First off, thank you also for inviting us to participate in the Small and Gutsy podcast.
You're welcome. Call me Laura, please.
Well, Laura, I'm just really honored, and we're honored as an organization, and especially your special recognition that while our overarching business might exceed your $10 million budget limit, that the Beyond Homes program really is a unique, distinct function within our organization that I think is worth sharing with your listeners. So thank you so much for that. I personally found my way into housing through a somewhat circuitous path as an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer back in my late 20s. And a mentor to me said something around housing can get into your blood and under your skin and into your blood. And that is so true for me. And ever since then, I've kind of worn many, many hats from. And the very first thing I did was resident services as an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer. And so I really know how important and how hard that work is, having done it myself for a stint. I've been with Abode Communities now 17 years and have really, had the opportunity to participate in the organization through a lot of different ways, primarily through real estate development, but also prior to becoming the CEO as the Chief Operating Officer. While in that role, I was fortunate enough I think I actually scouted Roche out through LinkedIn.
I love it. Yay for LinkedIn, actually,
exactly. Good. I was trolling, I admit.
That's perfectly good, yeah.
We had an opening at that time for a position that I think actually was maybe a director of resident services or something along those lines. And we really wanted to sophisticate and elevate that function in our organization. We knew how important it was. And, I don't know if it was serendipity or what, but somehow Roche's bio came across my LinkedIn and immediately got in touch with her. And she was working at an organization that we had been partnering with, though I had not crossed paths with her at that time.
One quick question before we go into Beyond Homes, which I know is more of the focus. I do want to comment that Abode has really done an incredible service in California and particularly in Los Angeles. And the homeless situation here is so enormous. You've been in this business for such a long time, and the concept not only of affordable housing, but the sustainability aspect, my guess is what drove you into the program of Beyond Homes, because it really is more than just affordable housing.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a moment in our organization's history where our board in particular had a lot of leadership around this and recognizing that, we don't have to do any of this and we can still happily move along as Abode Communities and do all the other great work that we do. But there was really a strong recognition that the wraparound services that come through Beyond Homes have an enormous impact on our residents' lives and not just for the residents who live there now, but for the generations to come in each family. And, I'll let Roche talk a little more about this, but I think our scholarship program is one of the ways in which that manifests really beautifully. You really see that through the service enrichment, we're able to truly break that cycle of poverty. And while we may not see the initial household ever attain great amounts of wealth, we feel really confident that we're having an impact on that next generation in that household.
I love that. Roche, I want to hand it over to you. You were partnering and then you thought, I am going to join this effort.
Well, so my background is, it started in psychology, clinical psychology, and working with child welfare. And the organization I came from, we had a set aside of units for transition age youth in an Abode Communities affordable housing development. And it was a beautiful development. And the youth that we had, prepared emotionally, mentally, and in every way with life skills to live at those properties were thriving. And it was such a wonderful partnership that when when they approached me, I was like, I wasn't thinking about leaving, but now, what a different and wonderful way to sort of broaden social work in the way that I had been experiencing it and the populations I had been working with to a much broader population and have a greater impact. So across the entire sort of greater Los Angeles, Southern California. And now, of course, we have a geographic expansion taking place as part of our strategic overall plan. And so the reach is much greater. And so I really very much appreciate being a part of that. It's exciting.
I love that story because you really took you had a more narrow population that you saw happened to be successful from the social service side that actually kept them engaged within a community. It was really an empowering way in which you were approaching youth, and therefore to then expand that to other populations that were families and other adults who really needed this, because not having that exposure or that gift, providing a living space is just not enough. And I think your organization realized that, and you coming on board with the expansion demonstrates that this truly works. In a way, you tested it out on the other side of it, right?
Yeah.
I'd love for you to talk about the program specifically and what you offer in the populations. And then I'd love for you all to talk about your expansion and what that would look like.
Holly, do you want to take that?
Well, I would love to let you, Roche, talk about the programs because you are really the architect along with your staff of our logic model and how we came to where we are.
So Holly mentioned our logic model. So one of the most wonderful things about coming to Abode Communities was this rich sort of like soil to work with. We had so many beautiful populations, so many different sections. It wasn't particularly organized in a way where we could measure our outcomes and look at what we expected to see from this type of input of social service. What impact would we want to see? When would we want to see it? What are our short, medium, and long-term goals? And so we broke it down into the 4 core area. Well, they existed already, but we further sort of teased out what it was. So, and you mentioned them earlier, youth learning and leadership, to focus on youth. And youth empowerment. I think empowerment is the overarching goal of what we're doing here in all 4 of these categories, is empowering our residents. Because, going back to what you said about Maslow's hierarchy, I love that. This empowerment and agency is so much a part of sustainability. So we see success when we teach people how to X, Y, and Z. So, or when they come to us and let us know what they want to learn. So that's another really, really important part of this, is a strength-based approach and really looking to our communities as the experts in themselves. But so we have our youth learning and leadership program. We have the adult capacity building, which is another pillar of the program, which targets adults for anything around healthy living, financial literacy, green living, emotional and personal connections, mental health, food resources, anything like that.
Great.
Parenting education. The list is so long. I mean, I have a little cheat sheet here. Bingo, Zumba.
Oh, I love it. No, I love it because that's all about building community.
Reducing isolation, aging in place for our seniors. I mean, this already existed when I came to Abode Communities, that's whole philosophy and approach. And then, of course, financial literacy, employment, education, resume building, career exploration, education exploration for adults, and other sorts of internship programs for adults. We also have our Connecting Community segment of the program, which is, it covers a couple of things, which you talked about: building community within the community, connecting our residents to the community resources external to them to reduce isolation and build this sort of synthesis with the environment around them, as well as activating civic voices. They're activating their civic engagement.
I love that.
So this is an incredible opportunity for a resident to take a stand at the podium at a city council meeting or something, with talking points, with support, with Holly Benson even standing there next to them sometimes, to share that experience. And they learn a process that they can take to whatever else they would like to, explore in their lives or support or advocate for.
I think that's not only empowering and teaching a skill, it's honoring the resident. I think that's quite beautiful, and I'm not sure that other programs can say that they do that. So I just want to highlight that.
Thank
And
you.
I'm glad you recognized that, Laura, because we recently, last month, adopted our newest strategic plan, and we are very intentional in that plan in centering our work around resident voice. And while we've always organically talked about doing it and done it through our work, we're really doubling down on that commitment.
I
And
love that.
so, yeah, I appreciate that you picked up on that and see the importance of that.
And another really critical piece about centering the voice is creating a sense of belonging and removing this othering feeling, which is around equity, racial equity, diversity, inclusion. It's an enormous lens through which we're working towards seeing everything that we do.
There is such an enormous gap in equity in our society, and it certainly is pronounced in LA. And so the fact that you're working to reduce that gap so strategically is quite exceptional. And there was another program or piece of the program, which I really wanted you to speak to also, which is all encompassing, but the support housing retention.
Yeah, that's the fourth pillar.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, you go. It's your program. You, please. I just read about it and I was like, this is so brilliant.
The supportive piece around housing retention, it has to do with building an individual's reality and realization around the influence they have on their own life and their own success and the success of their community around them. And I mean, that's sort of like a philosophical way of saying retaining their housing.
Yeah.
And being successful in sustainability. And this extends, if we're talking about people who are previously homeless or unhoused, now in housing, there are life skills that need to be relearned or learned in the first place. There is support that needs to be provided for sort of living within this new construct that's different. It has a lot of rules that might feel like law enforcement that in many ways can be triggering emotionally or mentally. And we take a trauma-informed care approach. We're actively listening, we're paying attention to what the needs are of our resident so that we can give them the tools if that's what they need to be successful. And sometimes that's, connecting people with resources for low income, electricity or food resources or baby items or, clothing, furniture, anything so that they can save their money and pay it for their rent, Sometimes it's the simplest thing of how to be a good neighbor.
Yes, I really appreciated the fact that it can be triggering around rules, especially where rules are you can't set up a tent on the sidewalk. I mean, there are a lot of things that have occurred in the last administration that have made it very scary, that you can be arrested, that there's criminalization connected to it. So the fact that it's depending upon how long somebody has been unhoused, that trusting your neighbor is a new concept or relatively new. And so creating that community and reaffirming and breaking through some of those triggers or listening for them in trauma-informed. I'm a social worker by training, so I so appreciate this lens. It's remarkable because those relearning of skills, or maybe sometimes learning for the first time, depending upon their individual situation, will hopefully create a lifelong shift and change. And as Holly said earlier, generational. So for the next generation, we'll already be affirming that community does work when community supports one another, and you can engage the exterior community. You have a voice, and people will listen to you.
We do absolutely take it, from the very initial concept of any new development, and we do think about ourselves, especially if it's a new community to us, recognizing that we are coming into someone else's community to provide homes for people who maybe already live there, but we as the building owner, operator, service provider. So we really go in authentically to hear the concerns of community members and their recommendations, frankly. And we've had some really successful models. I do want to go back to Rocha's comment about some of the civic engagement that we promote through our programming. I have been lucky enough to see this in action so many times where we have folks who we've engaged with who are either would-be residents, current residents, former residents of buildings that we own and operate, coming out to City Hall to testify in support of a development that maybe they never will personally benefit from, but they really recognize the value of it. And as Roche says, it really does also build some skills for them as well. There's something they get to take away from that. And you had asked earlier also about our expansion. I think we've expanded in a number of ways. And so the first way I want to say is Roche is right. When she joined us, we did have some version of resident services in our organization. And there are other organizations who are doing services with their housing. And it's kind of a minimum amount of service provision that's required by funders and whatnot. And, there's well-meaning people out there. When Roche came along, I would say, she was able to figure out how to take our kind of hodgepodge project by project service delivery and turn it into this amazing logic model that she spoke of, where we really think about and measure and track ourselves around the impact that we're having, short-term as well as long-term impact, and really have that North Star for ourselves that, we do this for impact, and that's the purpose. And I love listening to Roche talk about the work, because every time she says it, I'm re-inspired. And even though we've worked together so many years, but when I hear her talk about it, I learned some other new thing, coming from the development side, public perception too. It's really easy to think about wanting numbers, right? How many XYZs did we do? How many widgets did we produce? And services is so much more nuanced than that. Your comment about building community, one of the things we do every year, and Roche's team is amazing, and the kind of effort they put to doing this. They go out and they provide holiday gifts and holiday food in the winter time. One might say, well, so what? It's a turkey dinner. Well, it's an interaction. It's a moment for neighbors to meet. It's a moment for us to connect with the residents. And so one way in which we've expanded and grown is this, I'd say, sophistication of the program, which we, have since branded as Beyond Homes and really have kind of taken to that higher level. The other thing that happened, the next expansion was with the pandemic. And suddenly we found ourselves from a place-based model to a remote model. Under Roche's amazing leadership, we developed a closed circuit web-based opportunity. Young school kids could access tutors online and have services, and they did, varying degrees of success depending, and we were all navigating that time. It was really great.
Even to have some success, I think, is huge, given what kids who were couldn't attend school were going through in general, and then to have on top of it the complication of either being just newly housed or in a new community, so on and so forth.
One of the beautiful things about it is we're not abandoning that just because we're now in this post-pandemic. While we are reintroducing on-site service delivery, we are continuing our remote delivery.
Great.
And what's really great is right now, the on-site delivery is at 22 properties of Abode Communities, but we actually have 40 some odd properties. So now we can make this available to our entire portfolio, where we serve some over 8,000 people. The last piece on expansion is we are geographically expanding. So you mentioned in the introduction that we're largely an LA County based organization, and that has been true for our we're celebrating our 55th anniversary.
It's amazing.
For 55 years, we've predominantly been in LA County only, but we now have a presence in Riverside County.
Great.
And then our pipeline includes projects in Orange County, as well as 3 or 4 counties in Northern California around the Bay Area. There's a lot of excitement and synergy and energy happening around the models that we're doing, in particular the virtual format. Roche has presented that format in a number of venues now of peer organizations or other types of groups who have an interest in it. We're happy if people steal it, right?
I think hybrid, as much as we all groaned about being online, and I taught online like everybody else did and did consulting online and so on and so forth, there is something to be said for maintaining some kind of hybrid because of access. And so when you're talking about equity and closing a gap, then the idea of access is so much better when you can include the remote pieces. So Roche, you're on. Share.
When the pandemic hit, our phase 1 response, as we all did, was to, go home, shut the doors, hunker down And for us as resident services, it was relief and recovery. It was emergency response, basically.
Yeah, for
It was
sure.
pick up the phone and call 6,000 residents. How are you? Are you okay? What do you need? Do you need food? Do you need toilet paper? Whatever was happening at that time. We all remember what it was like.
Yeah.
And then it moved into, okay, this isn't really sustainable. We can't make thousands of phone calls eternally, if we didn't know how long this thing was going to go on as it kept going on. So we developed that virtual platform, which was the virtual expansion, which was what I would say is, we would call it our labor of love, as you called your podcast, is this commitment to ensuring that our residents had access to us, to resources, that we closed the digital divide. Because the closer we were getting the further we were going into this pandemic, you kept hearing about this digital divide. And when I was doing research, we were all doing research. What does that mean? It means that people are completely excluded from Instacart, from medical care, from, knowledge and information about the virus itself. And everything was telehealth, So what did we do? We developed this virtual platform. We developed what we would call Go Beyond Homes, which is an exclusive website platform from residents who live at our site. They're exclusive members. There's a property page in there for each one of their properties that says what's going on in their community, who can they reach on site to talk to if they need somebody. We have classes that take place online, mental health classes, parenting classes, cooking classes, reading clubs, all kinds of things, plus the after school program and youth enrichment programs. What was born from that was what we called the Resident Connect program. We have some very talented fund development and communication staff at our organization who went after an enormous grant for us to get Chromebooks for residents.
That was going to be one of my questions. That's fabulous.
So internet and technology was what was missing. That's what the digital divide is about. But even one step further, it's about digital literacy and computer literacy, which are two different things. One is, how do I turn it on?
Seriously, absolutely.
How do I turn it off? What do I do when it's open? And then digital literacy is, how do I navigate the internet? How do I learn anything from here? How do I use email? How do I use telehealth? And so we developed the Resident Connect program. We got 300 Chromebooks. With that came an education around digital and computer literacy. We're talking about measuring impact. We measured what their comfortability was at the onset. We found, in a short time that there was a 57%, I think, improvement in just 5 months. Now we're taking the step 2 phase. We did a huge survey recently in July or August and discovered that 90% of our residents at our non-resident services properties wanted to participate in the Resident Connect program and the virtual platform. So went downtown and picked up 75 computers, and we're heading out to distribute them.
It was interesting because I teach a pre-capstone class at the Price School at USC, along with my social work class. And one of my groups actually did education during the pandemic and talked about this very issue of the digital divide. If you don't have a moment to really hear where someone is lost, you can't help them navigate whatever issue. And I think we are a society sometimes that focuses so much on shame rather than opportunity. And I think you all focus on opportunity, and shame doesn't even come into the equation, and people feel that because they're empowered to ask a question, because it can be very shameful for parents to not have any idea of how to help their kids navigate in a school situation because the kids have brought home a Chromebook. And so then, or maybe parents whose English isn't their first language. So I really, really appreciate what you've created and the foresight you had in quickly adapting and maneuvering. And I think it speaks so well of how you think strategically and with the thought of your resident always in the forefront of your mind, whether the resident is a child or an adult or an individual. And I think that's remarkable.
Thank you for that. Yeah. We're proud. We are proud. Proud but humble, I guess.
Is there any thought about pushing on a policy level? I know that's kind of maybe a weird or out of scope question, but I just feel like what you're doing and the fact that you're measuring it and you're seeing this impact and you're seeing it generationally or projecting that it could be, this needs to be way bigger?
I'll start with, and maybe I'll pass it to Roche for kind of from the service industry perspective, but I'll say from the affordable housing industry perspective, I hate to be crass, but it all comes down to funding at the end of the day, and so there are some things that we could do in the city of Los Angeles, for example. There are limitations to how much the properties we operate can pay for these services. So we as an organization end up fundraising about $1.2 million a year, private donors and foundations to support the program. And so if the properties could be allowed to pay for more of it, then that would, be
more of a balance.
Those willing donors and foundations, we could continue to use their money to expand the program. Similarly, I'd say at the state level, and this is a bit of it's on the horizon. This is happening in the sense that there's so much housing right now for permanent supportive housing, which is housing unhoused, formerly unhoused, and chronically unhoused people. And there is a great pipeline of production for units that serve that population, but there is an absolute lack of available funding to do the services and the capacity to deliver those services in the industry. And so as these projects start to kind of break ground and the shovels are out in the dirt, it's starting to become something on the minds of elected officials and policymakers that we now need to double down on the service side. And one, I'll say, positive example of, around this was when Measure H was passed at the same time that HHH at the city was. And that just provided a huge influx of dollars to support services. This is the responsibility of government. And,
it is.
Really pushing on that is our is our best move in terms of trying to move the needle on that. But Roche, I don't know in your world if you've seen other pushes from advocacy point of view to duplicate the model.
I think some of the other conversation is around setting up housing providers and service providers for success, lessening the time that it takes to bring a resident into a property, someone who's unhoused, lessening the amount of bureaucratic loopholes that, hoops they have to jump through to get there through the coordinated entry system or through some of the efforts that it takes to get through compliance. On the service end of it, that's the focus that we're having is how to, move the needle on that.
So are you both ready for my round of quick and gutsies?
Sure. We don't know what that is.
They're fun questions. They can, if I say they shouldn't be quick, then sometimes we get very long answers. So they quick, first thing that comes to your mind. There's no wrong answer. You each get an answer. Big breath. I'm kidding. It's not that serious. But what is at the top of your wish list for Beyond Homes, a part of Abode Communities, but really focused on Beyond Homes? However, the answer can't be money or funding.
My hope is to truly realize that expansion that we've been talking about in a really meaningful and deep way. I know that we talked earlier about impact, and I am confident that the impact that we have is monumental. And there's so many people we're not touching right now that we could be touching. And so that would be my hope. And if I could just dream big, it would be that every single one of our residents knows what Beyond Homes is, has access to it, and gets benefit from it.
You said exactly what I was going to say. Should have just talked right along.
That happens.
In unison. But yes, to expand and to spread the love.
And then I'll add a piece to that, because then that ensures the next gen, right? That ensures the next generation of skilled individuals who have and maintain a home.
You've said this so many times throughout our discussion today, but it's so much more than a home. The impacts on people's lives when they have that stability, their health, their educational attainment, their ability to get a job, their wealth, attainment, every single thing is impacted by that. And we are seeing that, we're seeing so many times in our families where the children are the first to go to college. We maybe have a stat on it, Roche. I don't know, but if we don't, we should get it, because
we should get that too.
It is phenomenal.
If you were to think of a song that describes Beyond Homes, what would it be?
The first thing that came to mind was Imagine, John Lennon.
Right.
I mean,
Beautiful.
that's about war and peace, but this isn't about war, but it's more about imagine all the people.
That's the first thing that came to your mind. How beautiful is that? Imagine creating peace is also creating community. So, Holly, what about you?
I'm going to give you two answers because the very first thing that came to mind was the Pharrell Williams song Happy. Then I went strictly down to those kind of spirituals and folk songs, and Climb Every Mountain is the lyric that comes to my mind. And because it is hard work, and the way in which our staff are interfacing with people in trauma every day and difficult situations, and yet they're still delivering on this impact. I just, I find that their resiliency and their integrity about doing the work is just truly inspiring.
What makes Beyond Homes gutsy? Because you are gutsy and you're part of the Small and Gutsy family now. What makes Beyond Homes gutsy?
I mean, for me, it's because we do go beyond the minimum of what we have to do. We don't do this because we're required regulatorily. We do it because we know it matters and it has an impact. And, I think I joked earlier about my CFO, but I think, it's gutsy to build an entire program that relies on the kind of fundraising it depends on, year after year, and no certainty that that's going to come in every year. And but we believe so much in the program, we know that it will be supported.
Yeah, that's great. Beautiful. Roche.
I think from my sort of maybe tactical perspective or just hands-on, being willing to try new things and being open to innovation and being welcoming it and not being stuck in a way that's like, we're doing it this way because that's the way it's done and that's the way we've always done it, but really being open to a paradigm shift, to a sensory shift, to anything and everything, and being a visionary about it. Just that's what the team is, and that's what I hope to lead them towards. That we can do anything. We have to just picture it first, and then we'll find the money somehow.
What is something that outsiders or maybe even a few insiders don't know about Beyond Homes?
A good question.
It is a good question. I'm going to talk about our scholarship program for a minute here. I think people maybe are aware of our scholarship program, and I think everybody has a general understanding of how scholarship programs work, right, and what they do and what they mean. What I don't think is always necessarily known by folks is how the work of Beyond Homes is so instrumental in those young scholars finding the place where they are. Earlier this week, Roche and I participated in interviews for the 2023 applicants for our scholarship program. And we interviewed a narrowed down list of applicants. And, if we could have, we would have given a scholarship to every single one of them. Of course. They're very inspiring. But there's one in particular that stands out to me, a young woman who described herself as, very, very shy and had a really hard time kind of coming out of her shell and really knowing how to advocate for herself. And she participated in the Beyond Homes youth leadership program. She said that program directly impacted her life in positive ways that allowed her to go to school, to make the connections she needed to be successful. And I don't want to be too much of a spoiler alert because I think this will be posted after the awards are made, but she's going to get a $10,000 scholarship.
Oh,
and
I love it.
The idea that Beyond Homes is having that level of impact, I think, is something that people don't know.
They don't necessarily recognize or, wouldn't necessarily know. And the other thing is that sometimes I ask about an aha moment, and you shared an aha moment because bringing that to the forefront when you interviewed this young woman and she shared that, it's fundamentally has changed her life. So I'm thrilled for her, and her future looks very bright because of Beyond Homes. Beautiful. It's a great story. Roche, what do you think something that maybe outsiders or a few insiders don't know? And thank you, Holly, for sharing about the scholarship program, because people think of it and think they understand a certain piece of it, but the depth at which you just took that through the story is terrific. Thank you.
I want to say something that has to do with that, and then also add to that story, because I think it goes to what I wanted to say. I was just like, oh, she's saying sort of what we're thinking alike today.
That's good. That's a positive. That's a good thing.
Let's not apologize for being in sync. We're good.
Yeah.
This same youth is someone who didn't want to submit the application She didn't want to show up for the interview, and she almost didn't. She was the last minute, the last hour, she submitted it, and she doesn't know yet that she has won. So this reward that's going to come is going to be hopefully a huge confidence booster for her. But what I wanted to say in my point was, what people maybe don't know is the resilience that's required from the staff and the amount of commitment they have to make to connect with human beings.
Yes.
That it's an exhaustive effort, and that it's emotional and it's personal on some level, while maintaining professional boundaries, that it's not just build it and they will come.
Right.
A lot of times, like, oh, you're giving a workshop on this and you're doing a workshop on that. They're just going to come because that's fun and that's great. Well, our residents are people who have jobs, multiple jobs, families, children. They have to cook dinner, go to the grocery store, drive their kids to soccer, like everything. And then we have workshops, how do we get folks to come? So there's this constant sort of navigating a lot of humans' lives when you commit so much as an individual staff person to the success of this. How do they bounce back and stay resilient through the work? I don't know that people know that, it's just like self-care and boundaries and, because their tanks are full and they're willing to give it all.
I love that you said that. I don't think we give enough credit. And we certainly don't pay enough. I'm not saying your organization, but overall as a social worker, early on in social work school, right when I think post social work school, when I was in my first job getting my license and doing some clinical work, you have to learn those boundaries, and you also have to learn how to care for yourself simultaneously providing care for another, depending upon sort of what area of social work you're in. But I think almost all of them. And it was a great lesson for me. And I think what you're speaking of is the depth of your staff to be able to give. My guess is support one another because they need to build that resilience in having a boundary when something doesn't work out, because invariably sometimes it doesn't. And then to truly celebrate the story that you gave when something does. And it keeps us moving and going forward. I'm really interested in positive psychology, that kind of movement and that frame, because I do believe that it helps to build resilience. And so the support, I'm guessing what insiders don't know, is not only your team's resilience, but the way they engage and support one another.
Absolutely.
So last quick and gutsy, they're never so quick, but they are pretty gutsy questions.
Yeah, they're good.
If you could get one celebrity or influencer to endorse or talk about Beyond Homes, who might that be?
I'm trying to separate my own star.
It's always so hard to do.
Right. Because I think I would love someone who has a platform, right? Like a Michelle Obama. I mean, if someone of her, stature, public presence and whatnot could have this in her, in her view, that would be phenomenal.
It would be amazing. Yeah. And you never know. I think the more you grow and become known as a program, and a program that is, can be replicated and could be national, you never know. DC needs it, so you never know.
Yeah, true.
I'm going to give a cheesy answer, maybe. No,
there's no cheesy answer to any of this.
Well, basketball is right now in the final phase, right? We're in the playoffs. And I see it sort of analogous to real life, and I would love to see one of those professional basketball players on the Clippers team, particularly maybe Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, to come and represent for our residents, to see you can get injured, you can have a setback. You always take the next step in front of you. You look at what's ahead. If you look at the last basket that you missed, you're going to be all messed up about the next one, and you're going to miss. You're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take, kind of thing. I would love those kind of analogies from someone with an enormous platform like that, who everybody loves and wants to hear from, to represent for us, to share.
Let's get the whole team.
I'd love that.
Because you do fall down. literally and figuratively all the time. And so to have someone say, look, this is how, we pick ourselves up, and here's an opportunity for you to see that you can pick yourselves up too with support, because a team works. Yes, you have your high scores every now and then, and they're wonderful, but they only become high scores because someone's passing them the ball, right? It's a team sport. So I think communities are a team. So I love that. That was great. Both of the answers are terrific. Well, before I end this podcast, how can people reach you? How do people learn about Beyond Homes?
Well, there's a number of ways, and probably the easiest way is through our website, which is www.abodecommunities.org. And I can't tell you how many times people say Adobe. It is Abode, A-B-O-D-E. And through there, we have a lot of information. And then we are active on social media through Facebook and Instagram. So those are also places where you could find us. I would also just say, if anyone's interested in learning more, they're welcome to reach out to me and Roche. And, we give tours. We're happy to show people the work we're doing.
I love it.
We are proud of it. And we know that, it could influence how people think about this work if they see it in action. So a bit of a open call for anybody who wants to see it.
I love it. So I'm going to make a push for, if someone's in the LA area, they book a tour, which would be great, and they reach out to you. And I don't know if you can do this, but I'm going to say you can, because you can do an Instagram live, or you can do anything. I think because you have a virtual component, you can do a virtual tour for someone who may want to learn and isn't right in the LA area. Because again, I'm trying to promote your programming well beyond the local area, and it's already grown beyond that, or it's in the phases of being able to grow beyond that. So if you want a virtual tour, I'm going to do that.
We did a lot of them during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I figured.
There's one other thing that we're just launching this year, a young professionals group. And so if there are folks who are really, interested in a place in their career where they want to get more involved, it's at a very nascent stage, but we're hoping by the end of the year, we have a robust group, and for a very modest membership fee, people will be able to interact with Beyond Homes as well as the organization as a whole.
That's a wonderful idea, actually, too. I have so many things floating around, because you're really, as you said before, you are not afraid to try new things, and not afraid to have an idea, envision it, and figure out the steps to get there. So I just want to take a moment and thank you both for being on the podcast. It was just an amazing conversation. I feel like I learned so much, both about Abode, but so deeply about Beyond Homes and where that can go, and how that can really help support not just those within the Abode communities, but maybe in the future beyond that as well. Because I think what you've created are real communities where people feel a sense of belonging, and a sense of self-esteem, and a sense of growth. And I love the piece about next gen. I think that's where our society needs to invest in, and you have done that beautifully. So thank you both for being part of the Small and Gutsy family.
Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure.
All of the Small and Gutsy episodes can be found on the Intrinsic Group website, which has a Small and Gutsy page. The opinions and viewpoints expressed by our guests are independent and do not reflect the position of Small and Gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, so before you sign on to support or work for them, we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. We just want you to learn about the Small and Gutsy nonprofit and social impact organizational sector so they can spread their story and their impactful work. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, my brilliant sound engineer and composer, Pavel Franson, my very talented graphic designer, Nate Addy. Please check out their bios on the Intrinsic website. My incredible board of directors, Tracy Brown, John Gatto, Lucy Mello, Serena Rajabian, who believed in me and this project enough so to sign on to support this effort, and all of the folks, friends, and family who have guided and inspired me. A very special thank you to my biggest champion, number one fan, and best friend, without whom none of this would be possible. Thanks, Mark Witkoff. Thanks for being there. And thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, give us some stars, and write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. From small and gutsy to big with impact, I'm Laura Witkoff. Thanks for listening.